I am forcing blood into my brain. I'm hoping it'll kill me. For God's sakes, Unfriended was a slog to get through from start to finish. The characters were psychic vampires from the first scene, it was padded to hell and back. I ended up agreeing with the villain, and it ended by breaking footage purity. Can you honestly blame me for not wanting to do this? But anyway, Dark Web departs from the prequel to do its own thing. A young man discovers secret files hidden on his new computer that throws him and his friends into a deadly game of capture the flag. A noxious cabal of internet snakes who prey on the meek and defenseless watches them, and without tipping their hand, he must guide his unknowing love through the city streets, that he may return the laptop, that they all may live. Between movies, Levan Gabrielsi and Nelson Greaves were replaced by Steven Susko, who in turn replaced Vengeful Spirits with Spy Games. This was also Susko's directorial debut, but that's not to say he was a complete novice to cinema before then. He just started as a scriptwriter. He wrote Texas Chainsaw 3D, he wrote The Grudge 1 and 2, and he also wrote Red. Red? This guy wrote Red? From 2008. Never heard of it. But those are still some big horror movie titles. I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. So, let's see what the injection of new blood did for a franchise that by all accounts should have been dead on arrival. We open to pretentious Apple sounds as our leading man attempts to hack into his own MacBook. It's second-hand, and Nora, the old owner, never bothered clearing it, which isn't suspicious at all. I mean, look at how innocent he is. He looks like Frodo, but taller. Matthias O'Brien, played by Colin Woodell, who you may recognize from Call of the Wild, Unsane, and more interestingly, Searching. Searching was another Screen Life film produced by Basilev's Productions, the same people who made Unfriended, and released almost at the same time as The Dark Web, just 2 months apart. But I will say, if you did recognize him, you're more observant than I am, because he played a 911 operator. He calls his girlfriend, Amaya De Soto, played by Stephanie Nogueras. She's deaf, which puts a strain on their ability to communicate, but good guy Matthias has been working on a program that will let him talk to her while the computer signs in real time.
So what do you think?
But alas, she's unimpressed. Bitch. Stephanie Nogueras is deaf in real life. She, if anyone, ought to have appreciated the effort the guy went into. She must have hated this character. Relationships are tricky. There are layers to them that shallow solutions can't soothe. And technology is no help, as Matthias gets the beach ball of death before Safari crashes, and calling her back appears futile. Any Safari user having tried to use Facebook Messenger could have told you that, but the movie mostly ignores that. If anything, Messenger is thriving, as Matthias begins receiving messages by the boatload from horny women wanting to meet. Seems Nora was a bit of a playgirl. But never mind about that. It's game night. Over Skype. Okay, so the first movie set a few precedents. It had a bunch of friends who turned out to be bitter shitheads, and as their secrets came up to the surface, they began hurling insults and threats at each other, driving them all further apart. With that in mind, what would be the single dumbest game the characters could choose to play in an Unfriended movie?
We go analog, huh? Little toot.
Cards Against Humanity. That'll do. But for now at least, they all seem like fairly decent people. They're even impressed by the sudden jump in quality from Matthias' video.
But unfortunately, like, everyone now, because they can see what he really looks like, everyone on Facebook's just like, I'm friending him.
Is this movie self-aware? Did it just deliberately acknowledge how awful that name drop was? I don't know, but Matthias has other things to think about. He keeps getting interrupted by women asking about plane tickets. Seems like Nora was building a meat market. Or a harem, I'm not judging. And either way, he gets the beach ball of death again, only to return to a lengthy rant about the surveillance state from AJ.
Why do you think Facebook and Twitter are free?
Because you're
we're the product.
Played by Colin Del Rio, and he's this kind of gnomish conspiracy theorist, which adds very little to the plot, but he's got a great stage presence, and he's probably my favorite character. He's also got a banging set of speakers that may become relevant later, so loud they deafen everyone on call. Never mind, that's not how telesync works though, because back with Matthias, he's poking around the hard drive and finds a hidden folder with almost a terabyte of video files in it, and all of them seem to be from surveillance cameras and face cams. It seems Nora was involved in something sinister. But he doesn't have too long to think about it, as Nari and Serena, played by Rebecca Rittenhouse and Betty Gabriel, just announced their engagement! I feel like Susko is trying to compensate for the human feces that made up the cast in the last movie by having every single interaction in this one be as wholesome as a Rockwell painting. And it makes me nervous, because I remember the last movie and I feel like I'm sitting in front of a fire, eating rosehip soup with ice cream. And I'm just waiting for the moment when someone throws the bowl in my face, and I see a cat turd hidden beneath the ice cream, and from somewhere in the house, I smell gas. And I don't have to wait too long, as it turns out Serena's mother is dying in cancer, and in response to this, AJ says,
I remember when I had to put my dog down.
Wait, was that supposed to be funny?
Oh my god, you're so bad at it.
There's the cat turd. That's life. Sometimes you laugh at bad jokes, sometimes you die in cancer, and sometimes you pine for the woman you love. Matthias tries apologizing to Amaya for the time he spent away from her, but the problem isn't that she can't understand him. It's that he can't understand her. If he truly loved her, she would need to tell him what the problem is. The problem is this. Amaya signed Matthias up for ASL classes, but he quit after one lesson to instead work on this app. Amaya felt that, due to her condition, Amaya feels isolated from the world, and she hoped that by learning sign language, it would bring Matthias closer to her, and help him understand what her everyday is like. Not to mention, it would, if they could communicate easily, it would prove that her condition, it doesn't have to be a handicap, it doesn't have to be a hindrance in their relationship. And instead of doing this, instead of learning ASL, Matthias went and tried to fix the problem. And in doing so, happened to create a tool that could potentially help hundreds of thousands of people across the world. I don't know whether to be pissed off at him or her. Things aren't improved by the incessant messages the computer still receives. But it's not just another slab of feminine meat wanting to chat. It's Nora C. And she wants her computer back. In what he believed to be a victimless crime, Matthias stole the computer from a lost and found bin at a coffee house, but he's willing to repent. He will give the computer back, and that'll be the end of it. But his curiosity is tempted. A stranger calling himself Karan68 messages him on Facebook, offering Nora obscene amounts of money for unnamed services. He could walk away. He could just close the MacBook and return it. But hell invites hell, and Karan leads Matthias to the river.
It's so no one can track you.
Shit, this is Darknet.
Yeah, probably.
And that's an interesting goof, because the film is called Unfriended Dark Web, but at no point does the characters actually refer to it as a dark web. They always use the term dark net. And in that sense, the movie actually does a good job with the terminology. See, a dark net is a network that is deliberately hidden from the main chunk of the internet, and the dark net and the dark web consists of these dark nets. it's not the same thing as the deep web. You see, the deep web, it consists of websites that, for one reason or another, don't get indexed by search engines. The deep web is used by people who want to browse the internet, and specifically they want to browse illegal websites without being monitored. And the dark net is used by people who really do not want to be monitored, and that's all well and good. But what I want to know is what self-respecting programmer would create a Minecraft graphic just for the super shady message board to look extra cool.
Charon, that's the ferryman of the dead.
You heathen! Sharon's the wife of the Cuckoo King! He's thinking of Charon, with a K. It says on Wikipedia how it's pronounced. And while I stew, the movie carries on. Matthias fesses up he actually stole the computer, and he was about to return it when Charon messaged him, placing an order for something. And showing the video files, Damon, played by Andrew Lees, declares whoever it is has been wardrobing.
Hackers drive through neighborhoods trying to scoop up Wi-Fi addresses of any unsecured or vulnerable routers so they can...
I will commend Susko for actually doing some research into what I was writing, but I still take issue with the spooky graphics. I mean, I know Onionland pages have professional interfaces, but implementing a bespoke background on the computer just for the BBS you're making to seem even scarier, it's just taking it a bit far, I think. Then again, what place does Sense have in this site? Again, Charon68 reaches out and makes his order. Darker hair. Slower, trephination, and more.
Oh my god.
Oh. Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus. No, Matthias.
Keep going. My appetite whetted. The exploration continues into the many contributions made, and the vindictive works commissioned on canvases of flesh and blood. The starvation of a captive, the erosion of bodies, and a very nice reference to Megan is Missing. I think. The girl's name is Marion, so I don't know. But if you look at the second to last video, you will see the girl's name was Laura, which I assume refers to the last movie, but I'm not sure what that video would show, or even how Laura would be connected to any of this. Nari realizes the most recent woman can't have been taken yet, and if they act quickly, maybe they can stop it. Now, if only Amaya would stop spamming Matthias with messages! He found her. He found Amaya's home. Her sister is with him, so let's make a trade. Amaya for the MacBook. And to make it as unnecessarily complicated as possible, the man decides to make a game out of it. Matthias will lure Amaya to his apartment, and the guy will stalk surreptitiously from the bushes. And when Amaya gets to Matthias' apartment, the guy will get his laptop, and Amaya will live, and everything will be fine. Because when a movie has to be tense, it's best to have the characters make it as unnecessarily complicated as possible. I mean, oh, and make sure that it involves custom graphics for Facebook Messenger and facial recognition software that will scramble any video feed that a certain person appears in. That's very important. I mean, it's not like the guy could just, I don't know, burn the computer with a button push from 5 miles away. It's not like he could do that. But, to be fair, so far the characters, the premise, the build-up and payoff, so far all of it is much better in this one. I mean, the guy being able to hack a computer with just his presence is a bit much, but on balance it's all working out. And then...
It's not real.
What?
we're back to bullshit. Yeah, the guy clearly has the MacBook wired and can see everything Matthias gets up to, including the Skype call to his friends, meaning he already knows they know, and if any one of them leaves or tries calling the police, Amaya will die. And instead of just telling the people this, he decides to pretend it's an augmented reality game he's been working on. It's not actually real, because he would rather lose their opinion of him than risk them finding out Amaya is in danger. I'm sure that won't come back to bite him in the ass.
It is game night.
Luckily, everyone but Nari and Serena are amazed by the experience and take it on the chin, but Matthias still has to convince Amaya to come over, which he does by telling her how terrified he is of losing her, and the app was just his misguided way of not letting her condition stand in the way of how much he loves her. He could have just taken the ASL classes. But that doesn't matter. She's on her way, and it's all working out. Now he just has to herd the cloud of cats that he unleashed upon a network of depraved serial killers by proxy. Damn it, I know thinking under pressure is hard, but what was clever about telling them all it's just a game? I mean, a simple Google search reveals just how real it is. The address on the last contribution leads to an article about a missing girl, and the Facebook account the man, Karan4, is using belongs to her. It's ironic that Damon asks how, in the game, touching the bitcoins would have affected the story, only for Matthias not to consider that. He creates his own account and transfers the money to himself, and Karan4 will get them back. Once Erica Dunn is back with her family.
You stupid motherfucker! All I want is my laptop!
All I want is a Maya!
You don't understand what you have gotten yourself into. They do not let girls go.
What are you talking about?
The circle. The people I work with.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and say the River is a far more imaginative name than the Circle. If I had a cabal of murderers that happened across each other on the dark web and decided to turn murder into entertainment for sick fucks the world over, I would have much rather called it the River. Of course there is more than one Karan. How else could an operation like this take place? And when they find out who they believe Karan4 to be stole all their money?
God, they pulled you across the river, didn't they?
And this came with a texture mod. And yet they use a bare-bones BBS. With his own life on the line, Karan4 assists Matthias in convincing the other Karans there is nothing to worry about, reciting their code and explaining the transfer.
They're typing in all caps. Should it be in all caps?
Just fucking send it!
Literally, it means the deep calls the deep. It's from the Vulgate Bible, and out of context it means that evil can never end, because even the smallest temptation brings about a bigger temptation, which brings hell closer. It's a warning that accepting even a small sin will eventually lead to accepting a greater sin, which will eventually lead to damnation. It's also a clever hint that every mistake the characters make in this movie will bring about an awful fate. And the reason I take the time to explain all of this is the only intellectual subtext in the film that Susko doesn't bother explaining. With the circle off their backs, they reassess the situation. The switch is still on, and about Erica? Once she is released, Karan4 will have $10 million to disappear. It's enough of a carrot for Matthias to believe he may just pull this off. But in his absence, Nari found Erica Dunn. And what's even worse?
Sorry, that's ridiculous. Who's that?
Laura's here! All 12 of her, as this callback to Laura Barnes is in fact a circle, giving a practical demonstration in how to locate people through their social media. And just what that information would allow exceptionally dangerous people to do. They can create staged suicides! Emphasis on staged. I mean, the bar covering her face makes it look fake as all hell. Not to mention, this clip was supposed to be used as another live leak video in the last movie. But, more importantly than any of that, clearly the jig is up. The circle found out, and they're covering their tracks ridiculously fast, I might add. Matthias' plan is in pieces, and Amaya is probably next on their hit list. Does he react on any of this? Does he call the guy and tell him he'll transfer the money if he leaves Amaya alone? Does he then call Amaya and direct her to the nearest police station? Fuck no, got to keep the game going. I mean, he does the others the service of telling them it's all real and what's going on, which is nice, because all of them agree with me.
Maddie, you are so dead.
What the hell else was I supposed to do?
Called the police! Or not have taken the money. Or not have gone snooping in shady messages on a stranger's laptop. Or, and this one's the real kicker, not have stolen the laptop! But what's done is done. All they can do now, except for everything I just said, is go with the flow. It's 5 minutes until Amaya turns up on his doorstep. All he's asking is for the others to play along as if nothing is happening. And then it'll all be over.
My gym teacher got fired for adding blank to the obstacle course.
Velcro. Depression.
I like Velcro.
Not gonna lie, that's how most rounds of Cards Against Humanity turns out after more than 2 games. Time passes, but the game progresses. When Amaya's cart breaks down, the deadline moves in favor of the circle. AJ is next. But how does one assassinate a paranoid conspiracy theorist with little to nothing to trace? Well, it's easy when they like getting on their soapbox. When they like running their mouth, and just a bit of editing can turn them into an impending shooter. When a single phone call is all it takes for the FBI to track them. When a single wrong move can end them. When a single speaker can be exploited. When a single sound. And that's another reason why AJ was a memorable character. His death was fucking awesome! But it's not over yet. See, Nari didn't actually go to the bathroom, she went to meet Amaya at the subway, so she can get her to safety before they get to her. And for this, Serena must be punished. She's dead. They all are. But maybe, just maybe, she can save a life. In the most cruel way possible, as the circle summons the spirit of the prequel and forces Serena to choose between Nari and her dying mother. No, she won't play their game. She will not choose. So all of them die.
Get out of there right now!
I don't want to sound like it was an easy choice, but her mother had no knowledge about any of this. Serena, Nari, Damon and Matthias, they all have targets on their backs, but her mother... If she just would have chosen Nari, chances are they would have left her mother alone. I'm just saying. It's too much. It's more than Matthias can handle. He's the one responsible, the others had nothing to do with this. At the edge of his personal abyss, he pleads, he begs them to leave Amaya alone. In this moment, when he needs it the most, he remembers the ASL, and in a Hail Mary moment, he just manages to sign to Amaya to meet him where they first kiss. And he goes to meet her. But what are they going to do? Keep running while these monsters roam freely, hoping to never be found? No. Damon has other plans. He has recorded the whole thing. And what's more, copied the files from the laptop, and he will hand it all over to the police for them to tear apart the circle like wet tissue paper. They have lost! Unless this is what they intended all along. What career criminal forgets his bread and butter at a cafe for weeks on end? If they monitored the computer this whole time, why would they have let Matthias move the money? Why would they have allowed Damon to copy all of the files? And most importantly, how could they be recording from the moment the computer turned on? If they didn't know from the very beginning.
It was a lie.
They're setting us up. We did everything they wanted us to do. We moved the money, we copied the videos. They're gonna make it look like it was us the whole time.
And it was very fortunate Matthias happened to be stupid enough to mess around with the computer, and that not even an hour after he first turned it on, they had studied the digital lives of his closest friends with a fine-toothed comb with such accuracy that they knew exactly what parts to use against them and how, as it became convenient. And they just so happened to have agents placed all around the world to intercept said friends as it became necessary. I think I got all of it. And I mean around the world. At the same time as Amaya is lured into the very building the starving woman was left in, lured by the very software Matthias made, across the globe another associate of the Circle has found Damon. All Matthias can do is watch as Amaya is taken from him, as Damon is hung, and he is the only one left. But why? What was the point of all of this? Why them? Why this global conspiracy? Why this willful evil? Why arrange this complicated theater playing with the lives of people selected by mere chance? What was the point? Well, does a game need a point beyond itself? The end! Or an end. This movie has as many as 4 different endings, and when it was first screened, it was actually distributed with 2 different endings. One with this ending, and one where Matthias ends up buried in the dirt, and he's unable to call to Amaya for help because they blur out his lips. In another ending, the audience actually gets to vote on whether or not Matthias and Amaya lives, and astonishingly, they vote to save them. And the final ending has Matthias left alone with a gun as the audience takes bets on whether or not he will kill himself. And in my personal opinion, I think this ending is the best. Unless it isn't an ending at all. Susko has expressed interest in making a 3rd Unfriended movie. But he hasn't actually given any more details than that, and while this film has roughly the same critical acclaim as the first one, this grossed $16 million worldwide, which is a pittance to the $64 million its predecessor made. But what did I think of the movie? I think it's Welcome to the Game, the movie. It's needlessly complicated. It has too much makeup, but I enjoyed it, which is more than I could say about Unfriended. If no one had told me this was the sequel to Unfriended, I wouldn't have known it. Yeah, it's a screen life film about 7 friends getting picked off one by one, but that's where the similarities end. It's got a different premise, a different villain, a different pacing, and its plot is completely different even if they both end with everyone dead. The biggest difference is I didn't want to turn it off after 20 minutes because the characters were driving me up the walls. All of them seemed like fun people with distinct personalities and characters, people I wouldn't mind hanging out with. After watching the film once, I could still remember their names and describe them to you, and their interactions made them all feel equally important. None of them were passive, they all reacted to the situation in their own way, and in that sense they all felt like main characters. Possibly with the exception of Amaya, because she was left to the side for most of the film. But even then, her relationship with Matthias felt real enough for me to remember her. With that said, I didn't actually feel concerned for the characters. I liked all of them, and as the situation developed, I wanted to see how they'd handle it, but I didn't care whether they lived or died. And in turn, I didn't feel scared watching the movie. Part of that was the characters, but it was also the villains. Following a supernatural thriller with a crime thriller, I guess, the sequel automatically feels more grounded and real, but it also makes the unrealistic aspects of it more pronounced. Do I believe there are sick people in the world who will pay big money just to see people die? Absolutely. Do I believe people disarranged are affluent enough to pay $10 million for it? Possibly, but unless you're organ harvesting, human lives are pretty cheap. If some psychopath is willing to kill for money, I think they'll do it for $1,000. Conversely, do I believe legitimately dangerous people may find each other online and decide to capitalize on this market by offering custom murder on demand? Absolutely. According to some people, they already have. It's called a red room, and as the story goes, it's hidden in the deepest reaches of the dark web and offers to kill vagrants and other people who won't be missed in whatever way their paying audience asks for. Do I believe such a business would have active members across the globe and be capable of organizing a far-reaching conspiracy to murder a random group of friends as part of a deranged game and betting pool? Hell no. Further on, while hacking is portrayed fairly accurately in this movie, it does take some liberties that bothers me. I can believe cybercriminals would go to great lengths to hide their faces, but not creating a program that will scramble a video feed as soon as a specific person appears. At least not before 2018. And I found it very unlikely that within 30 minutes of what must have been manually browsing through their files, the Circle knew exactly what files to use against the characters and how. All in all, the Circle comes off more as a boogeyman, like Pennywise or Freddy Krueger, and I don't find those kinds of characters scary. Entertaining, yes, but not scary. The story started very well. It got organically more tense and one development led logically into another, but around the halfway point I felt it started zigzagging all over the place. In desperation, Matthijs tells his friends it's just a game, only to 5 minutes later admit it isn't. He makes up a plan to hand over the laptop, and then the plan changes to blackmail before it's abandoned entirely. At first they play along and then they abandon ship, and I just felt like the movie kept setting up plot points only to abandon them at the drop of a hat, with none of it going anywhere. Luckily, it worked in the movie's favor. All of these decisions felt like they were based on fear and desperation to get out of the situation alive, so I don't mind it too much, but now and again it did feel like the movie lost the plot. As for the deaths, I think they're far superior to Unfriended. Not as gory, but because I liked the characters more, they felt more significant, and I felt they were structured better than Unfriended. Unfriended started with a suicide we didn't even get to see, before a guy gets his throat torn out by a blender, and then a guy shoots himself before a girl chokes on a hair straightener. In terms of impact, these deaths are all over the place. Dark Web, on the other hand, feels like each death carries more of an impact than the last, and it steadily builds towards the end. Not just from how graphic or creative the kills were, but from how they affected the characters. Some of them stretch my suspension of disbelief though. For example, I don't live in the US of A, so I don't know how seriously 911 operators take shooter threats, but I feel like more people would call them in as a joke than people being serious. And after all the times gamers have been swatted for a prank, I wonder if it doesn't take more than just a threatening phone call for the rapid response team to be sent. I also felt the movie talk down to me on occasion. I know a lot of people wouldn't know that Charon is the ferryman of the dead in the Greek mysteries, or that it's pronounced Charon, but am I the only one who feels insulted when directors include these obscure references, but don't trust their audience to either get them or find out for themselves? In my opinion, that's what makes clever writing clever. It expects you to know. A flawless masterpiece, Dark Web certainly ain't, but it improved on everything I felt Unfriended did poorly. The premise was intriguing, the characters likable, and making the threat more earthly made it feel more real and therefore more frightening than its predecessor. What I felt it missed the mark on was how unrealistic the more grounded scenario sometimes became, and it wasn't very frightening, feeling more like a thriller than a horror movie. Still, it's a perfectly serviceable good time, and the only people I can imagine hating it are people who hate found footage and people who work with computers. Possibly also people who liked Unfriended and hope to see the story continue. I sentence Unfriended Dark Web to an 8 on a scale of 11. And I'm kind of peeved Susko didn't let Damon live. I mean, he was in England at the time, Maybe the Circle couldn't get to him in time, but they could burn his system, leaving him unable to defend himself against the allegations, so he would be forced underground, and then he would work to take them down from the shadows. It would have set up another sequel. Plus, if this movie is inspired by Welcome to the Game, it would have been a much better premise than what the games had. It makes me wonder though, what will the next movie be like if it gets made? Maybe the Circle goes up against the Blue Skeleton, and there'll be a face-off between the champions of fear for evil and the champions of fear for good, with Laura Barnes bringing the heat from the side! Nah. I'd rather just have Welcome to the Game 2. Thank you all for watching. I have been Cole Scratches. Make sure to follow my art channel, my DA, my Twitter. Like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, and I hope you will see me again next time to take a look at what I found.